Oh, genie of the lamp, I wish that the opening would be played in reverse! I wish for the title card to be purple!
Wow.
That was impressive.
Being born in the late 80s, I grew up in the early 90s with a lot of Disney's finest animated shows. Things like Tailspin and Gargoyles. Even things like Gummy Bears and, of course, Ducktales. And Ducktales was the cream of the crop for me. I loved that show. There was something wonderful about the antics that Scrooge McDuck's family would get into. For those of you unfamiliar with it, Ducktales was a show about Scrooge McDuck, who was Donald Duck's eccentric, Scottish, distant relative who was wealthy beyond imagination, hanging out with his three nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and eventually his niece, as they went on globe-trotting adventures, searching for treasure, getting into trouble, and basically being Indiana Jones for kids, starring waterfowl. It was a really good show, and unlike most Disney shows at the time, and even most Disney shows of today, it had a full-length animated feature, and if I'm not mistaken, it even hit theaters. It was called DuckTales Treasure of the Lost Lamp, and it was about the intrepid group of, avians setting off into the Middle East, finding a lost treasure, at the core of which was an old lamp that contained a genie. And before you start getting crazy, this movie came out in 1990, a full 3 years before Disney's Aladdin. And the similarities actually don't end there. The movies line up and parallel each other in a bunch of really spectacular ways, and yet most people I know didn't watch the DuckTales movie, despite everyone I know basically knowing how to sing the theme song at the drop of a hat. Woo! But, that being said, the movie was actually pretty good. I had a lot of fond memories of it growing up as a kid, and seeing it now paired side by side with Aladdin, I have to wonder, why did Disney basically rip themselves off? I mean, only 3 years passed, and then they did the exact same story, basically with a few tweaks, again, but minus the ducks and adding a fairy tale element. I have to wonder now as a grown-up if it didn't meet sales numbers, if it didn't quite, hit the bricks quite like they thought their fairy tale movies did, and they just decided, scrap it. No one watched the DuckTales movie, we won't do more movies about our shows, we'll just stick to the fairy tale game, reuse what you can from that movie, and let's recoup some profits. That being said, I actually went through, watched the movie recently, and prepared a small list of just a few of the things that these two movies share in common. I'd like to go through them with you and shed some light on one of the pieces of Disney's history that I don't think we've seen very often. Oh, genie of the camera, Kirk, grant my wish. I wish for a second viewing screen. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. So, with that, let's go to the list. So, first off, let's talk about the genies. Both the genies in this movie are wise-cracking genies who talk about how much of a pain it is to be stuffed in their tiny living space, and they wield phenomenal cosmic powers that they want to only use for good. They talk about how they yearn for freedom and to be free of their lamp, and how they can't be free unless someone were to wish for it. The genies even make a truckload of modern culture references, which, of course, we all think of as Robin Williams' shtick, but DuckTales did it first. So, an early wish with the genie in both movies grants the main cast with a pet elephant. Yeah, strangely specific, and yet it happened. And as the wishes keep going, there at the beginning of the movie, Robin Williams' genie, he grants tons of amazing things to Prince Ali, and the genie from DuckTales, he grants them tons and tons of ridiculous toys and finery. In fact, after a short montage, we see the characters having everything they'd ever longed for, all at their beck and call, and still with wishes in the bank. Did I mention that there's an evil wizard that wants this lamp? Dresses in a bunch of robes, hangs around skulking around, wields some really powerful magic that he gets from a glowing device, he's in both movies. We got Jafar, and we got the dude from Ducktales. I really don't remember many characters in this movie name. It's Ducktales, man. Come on, don't hurt me. But the truth stands, both of these guys have been searching for the lamp for a long time. They believe in its ultimate power, and they're willing to do anything to get their hands on it. As if that wasn't enough, they even have a bumbling sidekick, which is pretty much the fare for Disney villains, so I guess I'm not going to lean too heavy on this one, except for the way they treat their sidekick with a lot of physical abuse and threats and things like that, and the tasks that they send these people to do are a lot the same. Of course, again, I guess that could be said for a lot of Disney movies, so maybe we should just let that one slide. So, when the evil wizard finally thinks they know exactly where the lamp is, they trap the main characters in the cave that had held the treasure and the lamp, leaving them to die a terrible death. They turn and they walk away, getting safely free of all of the dangers that are entailed by the temple, only to find that they are missing said lamp, and that the main characters have fallen into a deeper part of the chasm that has somehow miraculously led to their escape. Yeah, both. There's even a scene not too far into this where the main character is in grave danger and could wish themselves to freedom, but instead they choose to let the genie be tricked into getting them to freedom. In Aladdin, he does this by saying, "Oh, genie, I bet you're not even powerful enough to get me out of here," and he gets himself out. Whereas in Ducktales, they are in danger of being mauled by a bear after the evil wizard is mauling at the door, and so the genie sneaks Scrooge into his lamp for safety, but then chastises him for not using his wish. Yeah, I should also mention, talk about the wizard turning into a bear. The wizards in both of these movies shapeshift. At the end of the movie, Jafar becomes a giant evil serpent, and just because he wished to be the most powerful sorcerer in the world. Whereas the sorcerer in DuckTales uses his medallion to turn into all manners of animals, including some that don't even really exist. So, shape-shifting wizards on the hunt for a magic lamp containing a wisecracking pop culture referencing genie that happens to create anything your heart desires, including, quite specifically, a pet elephant. Huh. Wow! So, you remember earlier when I talked about how the wizard was after the lamp and how the genie was on a quest for freedom but can only be wished out? Yeah, the similarities for the genies don't stop. The genies also loathe being used by bad masters and want their powers to be used only for good, but once the wizard gets a hold of them, they basically force them to kick their friends around and do all sorts of bad things, and therefore the genies are forced to do it against their will. And it's a real bad time for everybody involved, and it's real harrowing, and it makes you feel for the poor genie. And both films. In fact, when the temperature of the plot really starts to rise, there is a scene in both movies where Aladdin is kicked to the Arctic and Scrooge McDuck heads off into the mountains for a conference, and that leads to an action-oriented sequence showing off the snow. It's like they even really wanted to reuse the snow effects and thought what better way to make them feel isolated and alone. Yeah. Both the wizards soon wish for a dark kingdom that they can preside over, and it's even implied that this might have been their master plan to begin with, of course, and are content to do so as they sit atop their giant evil throne. Then, of course, the main characters do battle with the wizards. They defeat them with a bit of cunning trickery, and soon the lamp is back in the right hands with one wish remaining. And what do they wish for? They wish for the genie.
You're free.
Yeah. Freedom. They wish for the genie's freedom. In both movies, the genies dress themselves up in baseball caps and modern-day clothes and assume a life of doing whatever it is they want to do. And as if you're saying, well, of course these stories are going to be similar. I mean, it's all based off of Alibaba and the story of the lamp and all that jazz. Look at the lamps. I mean, just look at those lamps. They're practically identical. And before you say, oh, of course they look like that, before Aladdin, they didn't all look like that. Most of the genie and the lamp stories did not illustrate them this way. Disney did, and they did it twice. So, I just thought it was an interesting little tidbit, showing that even the world's greatest companies, sometimes they rehash, they redo, they rethink, and they reuse parts of what they feel didn't quite work last time. So if you're struggling with your story out there this week, I encourage you to go back to something that didn't work and see if there's something in there that you can brush off, shine, and make some magic happen. Thanks for sticking with us on Pen Made Mightier. See you next week.
Pen made mightier with our rolling